My name's Kyle. I'm an addict. Um, Born and raised in a loving household. Mum and dad still together. My mum did everything for me. My dad was the main provider. Always had everything I've wanted, could have ever possibly wanted. I think from what I've learned through my time in addiction and through the BAC, I was an addict from day one. My obsession started with football, Pokemon cards, Blades, all the regular crap as a kid that you can imagine. I had to have it and I had to have the best of the best. And if someone else had someone better than me, you can guarantee that I was going out and spending how much more money than I needed to make sure I had the best of the best. So yeah, I had a good childhood. Primary school was great. Got bullied a little. I struggled with my dyslexia, so I got picked on at primary school because my reading wasn't up to other people's, up to the standard that it should have been at my age group, which kind of made me feel like an outsider. Made me feel stupid. But I had friends. I was good in other subjects, and I'd bully other people for not being into my thing. So I gave as good as I got. But really, at a young age, I was always told by my uncle I was never good enough. I'd never amount to anything. That my mum and dad wasn't happy with just having me, and that really started to take effect on me. I joined a professional football team about the age of just after I turned 8, and I played there for 4 years. And throughout the whole 4 years, I was always told, you're never good enough, you're never going to be this. And while I was playing for the professional team, my uncle was physically abusing me. Every week, I'd be going to see him. Where he lived with my grandparents, so I'd be getting abused. I should tell you, my nan was an alcoholic, so I didn't spend time in the house. I'd be out in the garden playing football, and he'd always come out and I'd get abused for that. At the same sort of time of being told all this, my mum had a little sister, so that permanently indented me with, you're never going to be good enough, your family's never going to be happy with just you, no one's ever going to be happy with just you. So in my head, my family had my sister because I wasn't enough to make them happy, and they had to have another child to complete their family, to make them happy, because I wouldn't have done the job. So for about 4 years, until just before my 13th birthday, all the attention went from me to my sister. So going from an only child to the older sibling, I had no attention off my family, no love as what I was used to. I still got shown love, still got told I was loved by my mum, but yeah, so I was getting abused. The limelight went on to my sister, so I quickly felt like I wasn't good enough. There started to become this void in me that I'd never amount to something. And after 4 years, I was released from the football. Football's been my major obsession throughout my life. So when I was let go from the team, when I was let go, this disappointment, this anger, this resentment for everything built up. I resented my mum, I resented my sister, I resented my family, I resented football, and I was hanging around with the older kids who was quite clearly up to no good. They was in trouble with the police, they was using weed, they was drinking, and within about a week I'd picked up my first spliff, and that feeling just took me out of it. I felt like I belonged with a group, so I started hanging around with them more, I started smoking more weed, and that then took an effect on my paranoia. Always at school, secondary school, looking around thinking, why isn't he good? Why is he looking at me like that? Does he know I'm smoking weed at the outside, trying to put on this mask at school that I was a goodie? I could hang around with any crowd at school, but then when I got home, I was hanging around with the older lads, the tough lads, the ones that wanted to cause a fight. You smoke weed, drink. So I was portraying myself as something I wasn't. And that really affected me at school. I lost a lot of friends, became more isolated, and I believed the only way I could get friends was to become the sweet man at school. So I started selling sweets, cans of pop, just so I could make connections with people at school, and that never filled anything for me. I started getting back into my football. I've been to Germany and Italy representing England at school level. So I had a really high quality of football, which was an outlet for me. I always felt part of something, part of a team, and I loved it. It was my go-to. It was my safety blanket. Didn't matter what was happening in my life. As soon as I was on that pitch, everything else didn't matter. Football just was fantastic. It was my safety blanket and kept me safe. And then I started smoking more weed. Started working on the nights. I was going around doing car washes, doing odd jobs for people, working for family friends, doing labouring on the building sites to earn money to keep my addiction going, because at that age I couldn't afford it myself. So I quite quickly started working to subsidise my addiction. and I started isolating. I had a very small circle of close friends who had seen me go from this football enthusiastic person to drinking too much, becoming violent, getting police chases, fights, being arrested, and my friends almost turned their back on me. And that at first was a wake up call to me. With my nan being an alcoholic, it showed me how quickly I can pick up that. But instead of realising that drugs were just as bad, I turned my back on alcohol and started smoking more weed. And I didn't want to be like my nan, but not having a drug addict in my family, I didn't know the effects that that would have had on my later life. And I quite quickly became addicted to weed, and I was smoking £20 worth a day if I could afford it. I left school. I got good grades, not brilliant, but not shit. I got quite lucky with my grades, and I wanted to be a police officer when I left school. I went to college to do public services, and within the first month, I got arrested with possession, which shot every chance of my career down the drain. But being me, I still stuck at it for another 2 years because I thought, fuck it, I'll be able to work my way through it. And within them 2 years, I got more charges with intent to supply, possession charges, and it quite quickly went from just having a quick smoke and a slap on the wrist to appearing in front of a judge, getting a suspended sentence and a couple court fines. And that should have been a wake-up call for me of how my life was turning out, but it wasn't. I realised I had a problem when I started dabbling in other drugs. I took speed, I took base, I took mushrooms, took coke, and I never really took a fancy to it. Weed was always my main substance at a young age. And then I went back to college. I was working on a building site from 18 to 20, and I thought I want to get a trade behind me. So I went back to college to become a plumber. And I met the love of my life at college, and that filled that void. So I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I stopped taking other drugs because she filled that void in me. So I was obsessed with her at that point. And her dad was an addict, so I didn't want her to have to deal with him and me. So I quite quickly fixed my feelings on her, and it was probably the best year and a half of my life. I was sober, I had money, I was doing things, but I was still a dry addict. I didn't sort my problems out. I didn't know how to function with jealousy, anger, all the standard emotions. I didn't know how to come across with them. So I quite quickly showing signs of me being an addict, but without using the substance. And then we found out we was pregnant, and I never wanted kids. With my childhood, I didn't think I'd be a good dad. But as soon as she told me that we was expecting, my whole life changed. I was done with drugs, I was done with my old friends, I was done with this, I was done with everything that was negative on my impacts. And I was happy. I went out, I bought an engagement ring for her because I was planning on asking her to marry me. And that didn't go to plan. I went on holiday for my 21st birthday, and she was in her last trimester of the pregnancy, so she went away with her mum and dad to Wales, and I went away with my family for my birthday to Ibiza. And while I was there, I had a phone call telling me she'd lost our baby, and that very quickly took an effect on me. I packed up, changed my flight to the next morning, and from being a dry addict, I was at the hotel bar. I had €500. I must have spent all of that within 12 hours. I remember drinking myself and then coming round in the airport on the seats 2 hours before my flight. So I went straight back to the bar, carried on drinking, and I was almost denied access to my flight home. And coming from Ibiza, you've obviously got to be in a certain state to be almost too pissed to get on a flight coming back from Ibiza. But I explained it. Obviously I manipulated the flight attendant to let me on. Started crying because I was pissed. Started telling her all this sob story, and I was allowed on my flight. And straight away, as soon as we took off, I had a few more drinks and I passed out. And at the duty frees, I bought myself 2 bottles of Ciroc, and as soon as I got back and got my luggage, I was necking this bottle of Ciroc off while I was waiting for the train to go back to my partner. And I turned up at her door, 2 bottles of Ciroc later. I could barely stand. I stunk of booze. I couldn't speak. So she was going through this major trauma of losing our child to dealing with me because I couldn't deal with the emotions I was feeling. And that happened, that carried on. I was drinking all the time. I started hanging around back with my old friends, started smoking weed again, and then I was introduced to cocaine again. And I never really took to cocaine the first time round, but the second time round, it lit something in me. I thought that was the answer to all my problems, and I hit the cocaine hard. And then, so my partner was dealing with the loss of our child, and me turning myself into a full-blown drug addict. So she had to walk away, and then that gave me the fuel then to carry on using, because no one understood the pain I was going through. I was separate from everyone else. No one else had ever lost a child. No one else never knew how I was feeling. So I'd go out, and every night I'd be using. I'd be going home. My sister's 8 years younger than me. I'd be mentally and physically abusing my sister. I'd be bullying her. I'd be making her feel unsafe, unwelcome in her own home. And it come to a point where I didn't want to live anymore. So I attempted suicide, and my little sister found me in my room, out cold, bleeding. And I remember coming round while she was shouting my mum, and the look of terror in her face will haunt me for the rest of my time. And then I blacked out again. I come to in the hospital. I was withdrawing from alcohol. I was never really a drinker, but at that point, that was a major thing in my life. So I was withdrawing from alcohol. My mum didn't leave my bedside throughout the whole time I was in the hospital. And then for 3 weeks after that, they didn't leave my side. They was petrified that I was going to try again. And the look on my sister's face didn't alter the way I felt. I still couldn't deal with the pain I was in. I still couldn't deal with life on life's terms. So after I come out, I was straight back onto the coke, drinking, fighting, causing trouble, manipulating my family, causing arguments in my family, and to the point where my dad had had enough. He had to kick me out, and he did. So I went to live in my car, but being the way I am, I manipulated my mum through my suicide attempt to let me back into the house, and she got me back. And the same pattern would happen over and over again. I'd be kicked out, I'd come back, I'd be kicked out, I'd be coming back. And each time I'd use suicide to wear my way back through the house and promising things were going to change, but didn't mean it. And then about 5 years ago, I met a girl from school, and we started dating. We was using together. Things were going well. I didn't have to see anyone apart from her. She'd go out and get the drugs. I'd give her the money. So I was isolated. I didn't need anyone in my life. Just her to go and pick my drugs up. I didn't see my family. I just seen her. And so yeah, we was on the party together. She wasn't an addict. She could pick up drugs and drink when she wanted and put them down. I've never been able to do that. Once I hit something, I hit it till it was going to kill me. And eventually, 3 years into the relationship, she found out she was pregnant, and she stopped using everything. And I promised her I'd stop using. Monday to Friday, she'd spend with me. The weekends, she'd go home and see her family. So on the weekends, I binged hard on my cocaine, on my weed, just because I knew I had that freedom. I had no one there telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that. So the weekends became my sesh, and the come downs became worse and worse, to the point where I started verbally abusing my son's mum, to the fact of about the way she looked, about how she acted, about people on her social media. And she wasn't willing to walk away, but she had to, because I was causing too much pain and stress for her and the baby at the time. And I'd already lost one child through stress, and I was causing that could have happened again. Luckily, I have a son now. He's almost 2. He's healthy. He's happy. But I could have lost him as well due to my own behaviours. So she walked away, and she was in every right to do that, but I hated her for it. And we was trying to make it work, and then I found out she cheated on me. So my go-to reaction was to go, fuck you, I'm going to start using every day again. You've caused me this. You know, the trauma of what I've been through about losing a child, and now you're doing this while I've got a child. So that was my green light to start using. On the 22nd of September, my ex got rushed into hospital, and I remember getting the phone call, And the first thing to me wasn't, shit, my son's going to be born in the next 24 hours. It was, have I got enough drugs to get through that time at hospital to be able to manage to be there? So I, instead of going straight to the hospital, I went and met my dealer. I got myself a bag, I got myself some weed, and then I went to the hospital. While I was there, she was on gas and air, which I know for a fact I was using more of than her, because it was getting me out of the way I was feeling. I was going to the toilets for lines of coke. I was going out the front of the hospital to smoke weed, all while she's dealing with conceptions, going like she's epileptic, so worrying about how her fits are going to affect having a child. And the birth, I was too busy using for my own selfish needs than to be there for her and support her for my son. My son was born, and the first time I held him, I remember everyone says to you, you should have this massive pride, this sense of joy, this ultimate love come over you. But all I was thinking was, when are you going to take this fucking kid off me so I can go and have another line? And I can't imagine my life without my son now. I really can't. I see my son every week. But that was the peak of my addiction. I was too busy thinking about drugs than the welfare of my son. She was epileptic, so she was on tablets, so he had to withdraw in hospital from her epilepsy tablets. And I went out, and they used to say we'll wet the baby's head and go to the pub. I went out and I snowed on the baby's head. I went out on a massive coke binge for 3 days straight. So my son's in hospital on withdrawals. My ex is having seizures in the hospital, and I was more bothered about sniffing than the welfare of my ex-partner, the mother of my son and my son, than I was to go and put the drugs down and check on him. And she gave me every chance possible. For the first 3 months of his life, she was asking me round, asking me to be there, and I'd love to go. But my only thought was, fuck me, when's it going to hit 5 o'clock? I need to go and get my drugs. Because I'd hide my drugs outside the house. So when I'd finished, I was straight away able then to go and use. I was physically present, but I was never mentally present for my son. And that's something that I still have to deal with now. That for the first 3 months of his life, all I was thinking about was, I can't wait for this time to go so I can go and sniff. Instead of thinking how wonderful it is to have a son, something I always wanted from the loss of my daughter, to something I couldn't stand because it was getting in the way of my using. So after 3 months of this, my nose was falling apart, my anger, the controllingness about who she was seeing around my son. She had enough, she cut me off. So there again, that gave me every chance in the world to go and carry on using for another year. So I went back to the sesh, and on my son's first birthday, I was a terrible thief, and I robbed over 300 quid off my sister. At the time, it was to buy him presents because I couldn't afford it. All my wages had gone on coke, but I had no coke. I had 300 quid, and it quite quickly was, instead of going to buy presents, I was on the phone to my dealer, and I sniffed all that within 2.5 hours, and my heart was beating. I could see my heart coming out of my chest, and I remember looking myself in the mirror, and I was at breaking point. And the next day, I admitted to my family that I had a coke problem, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was turning around to my mum, who's loved me, nurtured me, cherished me for my whole life, was to admit that everything you've done's never been good enough for me. I've still had to turn to coke. And I did it. She was disappointed, she was angry, but she stuck by me. And that day I rang the BAC, and I rang Stars, and they gave me contacts to BAC. So I rang someone at the BAC to have an assessment to try and get into treatment, and it's a while. I had to ring up once a week to be able to tell him about my usage, how I'm dealing with life, what's going on for me. But I did it every week without fail. I was honest about my drug use. For the first time in my life, I was honest to someone about how much I was using. No matter how much I was using or how little I'd used that week, I was honest. And she was understanding. She said everything would be alright. But me knowing I was going to rehab gave me the green light then to carry on using, and more blatantly because my family then knew I had a problem. So my dad is a massive biker. He's lost a lot of friends through cocaine. So for like the whole time he's losing friends through coke, he's watching his son die from it as well. And I didn't think of the consequences of how that was affecting my dad. So I was ringing up, I was being honest, and I remember The first time I rang and I was like, when do I find out that if I'm being accepted into the, she's like, I can tell you now. And she told me I was accepted, and I broke down crying. For the first time I felt like, oh, there was a little light at the end of the tunnel. But she's told me that it might take a year, it might take a few months before I actually get there. And she just said, keep ringing up, keep being honest. And every Monday at 10 o'clock I'd ring up and I'd tell her everything. How week had been, how much I'd used, what was going on. And I think it was 5, maybe 6 months later, I had a phone call giving me my start date for the BAC. I came in on the 21st of February 2023. On the 18th of February was the last day I picked up a drug. The last day I had a session. I wanted to go into the BAC with my calm down finished. My drug of choice didn't give me any physical side effects, it was all mental. So I wanted to come in without any obstacles to take me straight back out that door. So I had 3 days clean coming in. And I entered the BAC, I came into detox. I never knew what to expect from a rehab. I was expecting a spa, cinema, jacuzzi. You know what I mean? I was expecting just to lounge around, but that was far from the case. I went into the BAC house and we did 12 weeks of intense therapy where I was open about the trouble, the pain, the misery, everything I'd caused my family. I was open to my peers, to my therapist, to staff. And it took me to places I never thought I was able to function without a drug. But I took myself there because I knew that I needed to be the dad that my son deserved. And I couldn't be there, I couldn't be that person if I didn't throw everything at it. So no matter what I had to do, I'd do. And there was plenty of times I went up to the therapy team and asked them, what have I got to do to be able to get to the end and be okay? And whatever they suggested, I did. We write a story, week 10, for your peers to hear how horrible and what you've been through. The trauma of my uncle beating me, the loss of my daughter Jasmine. Before I entered the house, I couldn't say my daughter's name. It was lodged in my throat. But I've been through therapy and I still struggle at times with her name. But I'm now able to say her name without the trouble, without having to go and have a line after, without needing something to deal with the pain it's caused me, and the misery and the embarrassment of using her death to carry on sniffing, smoking and drinking for 7 years after that. We do 12 weeks therapy and then I come to the resettlement, which was helping me with getting back to normal life, sitting around a bit more, learning to deal with boredom when you've got nothing to do, gardening, something I'd never thought I'd do in my life. Or the only thing I'd grown before coming into the BAC was weed. So now I'm learning how to grow tomato plants, strawberries, something I never took an interest in before. But now I'm taking things on board and I'm trying new things. We did cooking. They do cooking classes to help so you can live on a budget with cooking within your means, but still cook proper meals instead of living on sausage and chips or takeaways. They help you in everyday life. I've been out of the BAC now for almost 3 months. I'm a regular attender of NA because that is just because I've been through it doesn't mean I am fixed. NA keeps me well, it keeps me clean, it keeps my thoughts sort of alright. I'm still shit at thinking for myself, but with help from other addicts, I can get told where I'm going wrong. I've got my son back in my life, which was the only thing I've ever wanted was him. I see him twice a week. I'm present. It's his birthday in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be present for him for the first time in his life on a birthday. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to be thinking about drugs. I'm not going to be worrying about time. I'm going to be there to be able to soak every aspect of that day up. And that's something that recovery has given me. And I never thought recovery was possible. I never knew a recovering addict. All I knew was an addict. But now I'm surrounded by like-minded people, recovery people. I go to NA, I've got a sponsor, I'm doing the step work, I've got my family back. My family has peace of mind. They don't have to think the next phone call off me is going to be, I need money, I'm in trouble, I'm at the station. They're happy to listen, they're happy to pick up the phone instead of having that worry in their voice. For the first time in my entire life, My dad tells me he loves me, he tells me he's proud of me, and he tells me how well I'm doing. And that's something I used on, trying being emotionless, to try and like sort of be like him without the emotion. But now I'm clean and I cry and I'm honest. I get everything I've ever wanted from him, and that's brilliant. Peace of mind. He's no longer witnessing his son die for the same drug of choice that his friends died for. I programs. I volunteer at the Detox at the BAC because the sense of giving back to a still suffering person fills me with pride and it fills me with joy. I'm able to help them, tell them everything's going to be okay. If I've been able to get clean, anyone can get clean. Therapy team suggest things and they might seem like massive things, but they're not. They help. Everything that we can give you is possibly the smallest of things. Just to talk, it all helps the still suffering addicts, and with the joy I feel about helping one person, that is better than any drug has ever given me. I'm Kyle, I'm a grateful recovering addict, and I'll leave it there.